this is the first time I have a house full for the panelists. And it's wonderful to see such esteemed faces here today to have a wonderful discussion on the topic of survival of the fittest in a world of constant turbulence. So my first question would be for Mr. Saket. Do you believe that agility is more critical for HR now than it was a decade ago? Why or why not?
Absolutely. I think it is the risk of sounding cliche, right? It is a pace of change has evolved, right? What used to happen in 20 years now probably happens in 10. What used to happen in the last 10 years probably has happened in the last 1 year. Probably I think by the day, the time the weekends, there'll be so many more new things that are coming up, right? Things like AI, machine learning, analytics, NLP. There's so much change happening that probably it's difficult, for people in this room or otherwise also to just understand what really is changing and how do you adopt, and more importantly, be relevant and successful. I mean, in both for your organization and of course as your individual. So I think if you have to put 4-5 key factors, I think pace of change, I think is tremendous. That in itself is such a huge factor that anything else is just a sub factor. But at the same time, I think, especially since we are sitting in an HR gathering, I think businesses, business teams, I mean, technology folks have, I think, gone way ahead in some of the agile methodologies, things like Scrum, Kanban. There's so many more things happening now. I mean, while it's fun to talk about the technological aspects of it, but more importantly, how do we start to understand some of these things, and more importantly, respond, right? Or, like they say, flow with the river. So I think that's the second key part in my mind. I think the third key factor is also around things like working arrangements, right now, flexible work arrangements, hybrid, remote, so many more arrangements that all of us are struggling with in our day-to-day work, right? With that, how do you not be agile, right? In my mind, it's almost a question of being, agile is the only choice, if I were to put it like that, right? I think those are the 3-4 key things I feel because of which I don't see agile as being or a mindset being a choice. It's more a thing where you have to.
Thank you so much. Ravi, the next question is for you. How can HR actually develop a mindset that embraces change and agility? How do you think that can be done?
Wonderful question, and I think there were a lot of presentations and speeches just before this, and I think that's more than enough fodder for us to start thinking. But yes, the agile topic is actually a mindset topic, if you ask me. And if I just go back to a few organizations that I've worked with, where we tried transforming the HR team by itself and the way we work in HR. And of course, technology does play a very large part in that transformation. I would still say that it's the mindset that really makes a difference, right? And I think we used to follow something in our previous organization I found very, very interesting. It's called an ECG mindset. An ECG is nothing but, in the medical parlance, it's how your heart is functioning, which is the whole base of the entire body. The heart doesn't function well, you sort of collapse. So an ECG mindset in a corporate scenario is nothing but an entrepreneurial mindset, a collaborative mindset, and a growth mindset. Right? And one of our speakers was talking about it, heart and mind. So I think this is very similar. If you are able to get into an ECG mindset right from the time I believe that yes, this team is mine, or this organization is mine, or this problem statement is mine, and then I get into how I can collaborate with others. I think our keynote speaker was speaking about working closely with business, and then of course you have a growth mindset, thinking about the future and thinking where this HR team will be a few years later. If we follow this, and this is something that I did follow in the previous organization, I think you have the mindset aspect fully covered, and then of course the entire transformation, whether it's the tools, the tools, or how we operate as an HR team, gets covered.
Just adding on to what you just said, I just want to know, when you deal with the mindset of the HRs, is it easy to deal with the mindset of the people who are newer in the organization or the ones who are more tenured in the organization, and how do you tackle that? I'm just,
Are you asking about HR folks?
Absolutely.
It's really difficult to deal with HR folks either way, right? So, sorry, I think the most folks are HR folks, but I think whether it's tenure or people are new, and again this was covered by our keynote speaker as well. It's about how we think first. It's this flight or fight thing that happens. Whenever there's change, it doesn't matter. I might have just passed out of college, or I might be in an organization for 20 years. I think the reaction is very human, right? The question is, am I going to lose this job? Am I going to lose my internal customers or external customers? Am I going to be operating differently? What will happen to me? Can I make a career out of this new role that the CHR was talking about? I think all these things tend to cloud the mind. So I would not really worry whether it's a tenured person or it is someone who is very new to the corporate world. It's a question of what's in it for me that needs to be answered. If that's answered, then I think HR will do it better.
I agree. Thank you so much, Ravi, for answering that. Krishna, my next question is for you. Can you share a specific instance where agility in HR actually made a significant difference in navigating the turbulent times?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I just build on what Saket and Ravi have already spoken. So maybe an example to convey that. I think I completely agree with Ravi in terms of the ECG. So acronym that he coined, brought it beautifully. So I think I'll probably rewind the clock back to probably one of the most turbulent things that have happened in the last 2-3 years. 3 years now. It seems like long time back, COVID. And obviously at my previous org at Flipkart, we were faced with the prospect where suddenly we had to deliver essential products to customers across the country. And what happened in our supply chain in our last mile was that we had a lot of migratory workforce in every city. And actually that's how labor patterns happen across India. If you look at it closely. And what we find is suddenly all this migratory workforce went back to their home cities. And we still have to deliver all these products to our customers. So what do we do? And I think the agility that the entire HR team are working alongside with business, the first thing that we brought ourselves to understand is face that adversity head on and say, we need an enterprise mindset, which is basically we need to understand business in its totality, right? What are the kind of demographics of the places we operate in? What's the kind of workforce that we can tap into? Suddenly we found that there is actually a workforce that we can cater to, understand what their needs are, build a cross-functional team that would be agile, work on the problem almost every day, and figure out how to tap into this workforce and then build the products and services that actually cater to this workforce. And this gave birth to what we call internally as the flex model in our supply chain. And that actually almost now contributes 50-60% and upwards of how we deliver products in the country. So it's almost like adversity in a particular time gave birth to creativity. And all of that happened actually through agility at the core. Because if the teams did not come together cross-functionally, it's not just HR's problem, right? HR, operations, business, product, technology, analytics coming together and almost working in whatever, whether it be Kanban, Scrum or whatever. The methodology is actually secondary, but the mindset that Ravi spoke about in terms of just being very clear, mission focused, that this has to happen, and these are the needs of our new sort of workforce, and tapping into it and addressing their needs in an extremely agile fashion is what gave birth to a completely new workforce model for us. So I think that's like a very, very powerful example that I can actually.
That's wonderful. That's why we say that necessity is the mother of invention. And I would say this invention was actually which led to the agility in terms of the new practices being followed within the organization to tackle the situation that was there. Siddharth, my next question is for you. In your experience, what resistance or challenges might HR face in advocating for implementing agile practices as I was speaking to Ravi about? So basically, I just would like to know, what is your experience about it?
Sure, it's kind of.
Yeah.
This is better?
Yeah.
So this is agile, right? Checking with the audience and doing the right thing so that whatever is the intent is achieved. So firstly, thank you for having me here. And I guess most of my co-panelists have kind of touched upon this. I didn't know that a word called Agile HR used to be there when I was working 2008. Just around that time, a university in the US had come up with something called design thinking. right? And in design thinking, you have a stage of design thinking called empathy, right? Which is you define the problem and empathize so deeply with the user that the problem is so well designed that the solution lies right there. So we started using a lot of this, and I've been using this over the years. And I think mindset is such a beautiful word that we've all got, right? All of us have been kind of talking about it. One of the fundamental challenges is, I'm not talking about, how HR can be agile to deliver stuff, right? I'm going to say that's like a given, right? So that's definitely one of the challenges, especially if you have a slightly tenured HR team. I think many HR leaders are facing that because we've always done something this way. Can you continue doing it and so on? So that's an influence item, right? You try influence, and if influence doesn't work, you try a little more influence in other ways. You pick that up. Okay. Then the other thing is actually working with business on agile. Right? And by that, I mean trying to figure out a business problem that's going to get solved through a people solution. And by that, it's basically business through people, right? It's not that you take a decision that's completely business centric or a very welfare, touchy feely solution that's people centric, but then nothing is actually coming out for the business. So I think it's about placing that, talking to business leaders about it. It works at two different levels. It works at the relationship level, works at the HR capability level, and start with small experiments, show that it actually works, and it works at two different levels actually. It works at what I would call the mindset level, and finally at the sentiment level of every business. Right? If the sentiment level there is a certain alignment in your larger workforce, and those alignments are going to lead to behaviors that are going to help your business, right? That helps overcome resistance automatically, because then your business leaders start talking to you saying, hey, when this guy is in the room, my business outcomes are going to get easier, faster, more predictable, and so on. So I think it's really about working at these different levels.
Thank you so much. I think, Ravi, what you also said in terms of what lies for me, with this agile practice being followed, is something that really interests everybody in terms of, if we do this, what's there in store for me. Thank you. Thank you so much. Saket, can you provide any example of successful collaboration between HR and other departments fostering agility?
So I think building on from where Siddharth left, right? Not just about one function like this HR team that we're trying to be. It's about the entire organization coming together and trying to succeed in a certain environment which is chaotic, whatever it is. It's about if you start to think like that, okay, or the entire organization is working towards solving for a larger business compensation, then it's about everywhere that you look at, every facet of work. I think there are enough and more examples that you will find that about partnerships of HR, other business teams and stuff. And just to name a few, and I'm sure all of us face this in our day-to-day lives. Right? So, let's say it's the simplest of things, performance management. Right? It's like HR trying to do it themselves, not really. They're just setting up the process. Right? The business leaders, you work closely with them to identify what's the overall business, larger business goal, and then more importantly, align the people or individual goals accordingly, so that you're able to move in that direction. In startups, especially this thing about 5x, next growth, like 2x growth. So those growths will need to come in with a certain target or a metric or a smart assigned to a certain individual. It doesn't happen in here. Right? So that's one. Similarly, if you look at examples around hiring, again, strong partnerships, agile teams, both in HR and business teams, to work together to understand what's really the requirement, right? The roles may not sometimes really be clear, right, to some of the panelists that said, right, that when you're trying to set up a business, you don't really know what kind of talent that you're trying to bring. Right? You start with some form and shape of JD. You slowly try and evolve that and say that, this is the kind of person that I'm really looking at. This is the person that is where you tend to find those kind of people and all that. Similarly, again, to talk about larger level interventions around culture changes, change management interventions. Right? Again, HR teams are working very, very closely with business teams, leaders, mid-level managers, or employees at large to be able to make those changes really happen on the ground. Right? So I mean, I see it pretty much everywhere. In our day-to-day life, every moment that we're working, I think collaboration that way.
Thank you, Saket. Ravi, technology and HR go hand in hand. How do you think that technology play a role in enabling the HR practices and how it can be leveraged to the maximum?
Sure, absolutely. And technology is an enabler. It's an enabler for business, not just HR. I must be with you on that one. But and HR is a business function. So let's accept that. Makes a big difference to business. We were just talking about it in terms of what impact does it have on business. So I won't just say HR. I think technology plays a role everywhere. I don't think we can live without it. Coming specifically to HR, I think it frees up a lot of us in terms of what we can do in the future, right? So there's been a certain way in which all of us have been operating. It's changed over so many years. But what we could see in the demo today, for example, if you just look at HRone, you look at the list of things that you can do or the tool can do for you, let's put it that way. It's scary, I actually worry about, I'm going to lose my job if I call you guys and look for this tool or we do an RFP or something. No, seriously. It can replace many of the functions that we do today or were doing yesterday and they've already been replaced. We don't know, it happens. And I think this is something we need to come to terms with, that sometimes there are tools which can help us do our stuff far better than what we were doing earlier. We need to accept this, right, as HR folks as well. And I think that really then frees you up to do a whole lot of things which are value added. I mean, we were just talking about the value that you can bring to business. How will you do it? Frees you up to think a little more about the business imperatives rather than see it only from a talent perspective. And I think this is something which is extremely important. Brings in a lot of agility because your internal customers or sometimes your external customers do not need you all the time. Right? It's a little scary thought. But I can talk to a chatbot and get all my answers probably if I ask it the right question. Right now, chatbots are very irritating, I must say, especially the bank ones. You still have to talk to a relationship manager. But it's getting there. We just saw generative AI in this HRone tool as well. So if you could put together an announcement, using this, why do I need an HR person to put an announcement together and send it to someone for an approval and then post it somewhere, right? Why do I need a pulse survey to be done by a human being? Right? As long as I know what I'm looking for in terms of a pulse survey, it can be done by this tool. So I think this is something that really frees me up to have that conversation with my managing director, for example, and not concentrate on doing all of this. So I think resources-wise as well, it frees up a lot of resources. I can possibly use them in different parts of business rather than put them into an HR role. So limitless, but tools and technology are day-to-day life. I don't think we would have reached here on time if it wasn't for Google, for example. So, or you would go to the wrong Hyatt in Bangalore. So technology, absolutely. So I think it's the same for HR.
Thank you so much for those insights. Krishna, what specific strategies have been employed in your organization to embed agility within HR functions?
Yeah, I think Ravi spoke about agility as a common thing across all functions, not just HR. But specific to the question, I think one of the things that I found particularly interesting, and Siddharth spoke about it as well, which is the design thinking concept, right? And when we think about building for the customer in any field, B2C, in any domain, pharma, B2B or whatever, I think we always think about customer at the center and we design around the customer, right? And I often find it very intriguing that, particularly in the HR space, we've taken some time as an industry to get there where we put the employee at the center. And when we think about the employee at the center, it's not just something which is a hollow phrase, but you really have to force yourself and say, actually not all employees are alike. Each employee is a human being going through a different life stage, right? As an example, there's somebody who's an aspirant to join your company, who's a candidate. There's somebody who's a first-time manager in a company. There's somebody who's dealing with
coming back to the workplace after a sabbatical, it could be due to a life event, it could be maternity, it could be anything else, right? So you have different types of employee personas, and actually what we did at Flipkart previously is we actually defined all these personas that we thought were important to solve for. And what we then did was we actually went and met these employees that belong to these cohorts, understand their requirements, understand what their core problems are. So one of the interesting examples I'd like to talk about is we often think about when somebody joins a company, they want to get set up, right? And you set them up, you have an induction program that focuses on all the things that they know about the company, the culture, and so forth. But the interesting insight was that somebody who joins a company, they need to understand the secret sauce of what makes them thrive or be successful in the company. And each company has its own microculture, ways of working, right? The ability to navigate the system, so to speak. So we gleaned all these insights, and then we defined metrics. And in some cases, interestingly, we found that we didn't even have the instrumentation to actually put the baseline on these metrics. So we actually put all these metrics together, instrumented them, and then defined targets. And targets both from an input perspective as well as an output perspective, right? And this is all customer parlance that I'm actually talking about. It's nothing radically new in the industry, but I'm just borrowing heavily from the rest of the industry into HR. And once we did all of this, we actually defined sprints to say, in these next 2 weeks, these are the use case stories that we're going to solve for this persona, and this is how we're going to measure progress. And get a cross-functional team to actually just start measuring progress, and periodically touch point with that same persona group and say, have we made progress or not? And as Ravi put it, you don't need people to go and talk to those employees, you can roll out a survey, which automatically figures out who to talk to, what questions to ask, and so forth. So now you have this complete machinery, which is actually backed by a lot of science and technology, to be able to deliver what? Delightful employee experience. So, and ultimately you solve for this through a variety of modalities. So that's what we did.
That's a wonderful thought process behind this. Yeah, I think this deserves a round of applause. Thank you so much. So that, in what ways can Agile HR contribute to enhanced employee engagement and satisfaction? I think we just got some insights from Krishna on this. So what would you like to add on to this question?
Usually in Viva OC, the last day gets the easiest question. But here it seems to be third.
It seems everybody is taking what you have to say.
The last word. Last. So every time it comes, I'm like, Acha, this part is easy question. Okay. So let me share this. I think Agile, for a long time, HR conferences are about two things. How can HR get onto the table? Seat at the table. Usually it's on the table. Right? I think the world is moving towards how can HR set the table. Which is basically decide who sits at the table and how that is. And I think Agile HR or Agile way of working is a great hack into that. Right? If someone is interested to get my book free copy, just ping me on LinkedIn. I'll send it to you. Those days it wasn't called Agile HR. I just called it HR Metrics, IX, because I'm a reader of asterisks and so on. So, right? So I think there are a large number of ways, and I'll kind of talk about one thing which I've actually used over the years, and I call it the diamond line approach. Right? Whichever business you are in, much like what you said, Krishna, start off by understanding what is it which delivers value to the customer of that business. Right? Let me take one or two examples. Take retail, for example. Right? In retail, assuming that your buying and merchandising is pretty much sorted, what actually matters in brick and mortar retail is that when your customer comes there, your face-ups are done, your planogramming is adhered to, and the customer, the last point of contact, your CSA who's there, understands the product, greets, understands, explains, sells, and thanks. As long as this is done, your diamond line is sorted. Right? Why do I call it the diamond line? Is because if you have a huge mine, right, where you're mining for diamonds, You can have huge machinery, even a housing complex for your employees, birthday parties, rangoli competitions, etc., etc., and internationally, connects with De Beers and whatever else. But none of that matters if you are not chasing the diamond line in the mind. As long as that is there, your entire drama and details is okay, granted, right? But if you are not after that diamond line, end of story. I mean, pack up your mind and do something else, right? So I think as HR, we have this brilliant opportunity to actually use the agile way of thinking, which is again very first principles. Don't keep thinking about what I have done in the past, which other company did, this, and so on. And hence, it's a little counterintuitive to best practices. A person who's chasing best practices can never do next practices or best fit practices. You got to understand what is best for your own organization, for your own business, and then go ahead. Right? Let me give you a small little example. I think I have another 1 minute going by that timer. Right? By the way, we have this huge timer looking at us. Right. So in my present organization, in Urban Piper, see, it's much easier to kind of do agile HR in companies which lend themselves, with businesses that lend themselves, right? When you have a very large user base like we had in HCL, we could actually do psychographic segmentation and kind of do archetyping and so on. When you get into something like healthcare, you understand what's the moment of truth, right? One of the diamonds in the diamond line in healthcare is, okay, doctors are supposed to be good, they're supposed to know, right? They can't go to the patient and say, Acha, let me kind of just Google azithromycin and come back to you, right? Right? Whereas in a cloud SaaS kind of a company that Urban Piper is, like McKinsey said, there are different ways that this HRO's got to operate. And one of the things that you've got to do in SaaS and tech is you've got to enable your managers to be the best kind of sources of motivation and energy that is there out there in the organization. Right? You can't kind of try and say, I will do. There's only so much you will do. Right? So it's about figuring out that sentiment that's there. Instead of going for engagement surveys, engagement is kind of, for me, and I'm probably controversial here, when I say engagement is a little bit of a superstition, right? If engagement is high, then productivity might go high. So instead, we started chasing what is this construct called discretionary effort. What is discretionary effort? It's very different from OCP, right? Discretionary effort is how do I make an employee have an intent of wanting to do more in the direction of his or her role. No, it's not for greater good. It is exactly for the role. So we went out, did an empirical study around 110 statements. So the first thing we did is go and apologize to employees. So all my HRBPs went a dude, long survey coming, but we're serious about it, give us a chance. Okay, and I think authenticity works in Agile HR, right? Going and saying, I don't know, I'm trying to figure out, please help me, right? We had 90% response to this survey. We ran a regression analysis on it and figured out just 6 dimensions actually helps employees want to do more. First is self-respect. My manager treats me with respect. Go ahead. Appreciation at the workplace. And a couple of other things which includes active elements of engagement, which is like, I have done my best to influence people around me at work. Versus, oh, I'm this victim over here and the company's got to take care of me, boo-hoo, baby feeling. Right? So this we measure 33% every month, and these are not anonymous surveys, right? Because anonymous started off in the industrial age when I needed physical safety. I didn't want someone coming and bashing me up like a Charlie Chaplin thing, right? Modern times, right? So we say, no, we are a safe place. We are not going to, be dangerous here. So we have non-anonymous surveys. Took a little bit of time to build that trust. But today, every manager in Urban Piper has something called a People Power Index, right? It's published among managers. It's not a name and shame thing. It's basically a very genuine way of going back. Whether you've been doing your one-on-ones on time, whether your quality of feedback, the way you've been giving feedback is great. Your pulse survey results, stuff like HR has a rag tagging with employees after their one-on-ones. So we asked managers, hey, Here are your 10 employees. 2 of them are likely to leave. Are you okay with it? Sometimes you're like, hey, that's good news, dude. Come, let's go out for a walk, right? Other times, oh my God, we got to do something about it. So then we actually go back and say, okay, what is it you want to do? And that's the agility. Because there's only so much that in a SaaS business you can go and touch a customer, right? What you can actually do in Agile HR in a SaaS business is actually help employees be the best version of themselves, right? So we have this people power index. It's been received very well, largely because it's respectful, it's real, it's something that managers can do for themselves, and managers see that the more they do something around this, one of the other things is manager as a coach. What's the score the manager is getting as a coach, as a performance coach, and it's helping them live a better life. So yeah, Agile HR's either got to help the customer or help people who are delivering to the customer. It's always business through people.
Thank you, Siddharth. Saket, now that we've spoken about impact of agility in terms of employee engagement and HR practices, how to incorporate the agility with other departments within the organization. I'd like to know, how do you balance the need for agility with ensuring compliance and risk management within HR processes?
Very interesting question. So yeah, I mean, on the face of it, these two look like diametrically opposite sides, seemingly of anything. So yeah, on one side, when you're talking about agile, just by definition, which is flexibility, adaptability, adaptability, which are into a conversation, and at the same time, from agile methodology perspective, essentially it's about iterative development, iteratively moving a certain way. Co-panelists what you spoke about, right? So looks like on one side we're saying up, the other side then it's compliance, right? You go hard and fast, right? Either it's 0 or 1, what do you do, right? So, I mean, in my mind, there's no right answer to this, but at the same time, I think the way to approach is to say that yes, how do you make your processes, uh, ways of working, mindset, most importantly, as agile, but at the same time, be aware of the regulatory frameworks that exist. I just use the word regulatory. I don't know if that's a right usage in this context, but it's about knowing the labor laws, right? You can't touch them. It's about also knowing the tax rules, right, that exist. You can't touch them. Then similarly, it's about also understanding things like ethics, integrity, right? I'd also touch upon the elements of cost, right? You can't uh, go wrong as far as these things are concerned, right? So there's only a 0 or a 1, right? Especially again in agile context, there's a binary, right? Either you're right or you're wrong, right? So I think when you start to look at it in that way, I think it's about agility in processes, mindset, ways of working, right? But at the same time, as far as compliance goes, uh, essentially it's a 0 or 1. Decide what's negotiable, what's non-negotiable. The way I call it is like either white or a black, or then define what's gray, right? And then work between that, right? So gray, for example, okay, there you choose to be as you like, as the organization demands and requires. But again, there are then things which you cannot just touch upon at all, right? We saw these things, right? And again, to build or find the balance between the two, the approach broadly in my mind is like understand most importantly the regulatory or whatever it's called landscape, right? Be extremely conscious of it, and which is where the tons of years of HR, business, whatever knowledge that each one of us have will come in handy, right? And that's where then more importantly try and see how can we support these new age flexible practices. And then most importantly, which is a fundamental root of Agile is continuous improvement, right? Make one iteration and then most importantly build on it. And of course, documentation as far as our function goes has to be key. So I think those are the 3-4 aspects that I would put up as far as if I were to balance between the two. If it fully answers the question, but I think that's the best that one can think of as far as moving ahead to attempting to find that balance.
I think that's quite a balanced answer. Ravi, I think this question has been partly answered by you earlier also. So it's more like what common challenges do organizations face in transitioning to and sustaining agility, in HR practices?
Yeah, I think the challenges are very similar to anyone who's going through a transformation, and not just the HR folks. And you're right, the first part always is that, what's in it for me, and, how am I going to get affected? Or if it's a business, then how is the business going to get affected? But I think more than that, it's also about, you know, somebody talked about purpose, right? It's also about the purpose. Is that clear? You know, as an organization, are we going in X direction or Y direction? Is that very clear? If it is, then I think part of the challenge is, you know, taken care of. Right? So I'll give you an example. Sometime during COVID, I was with a healthcare company, and as you can imagine, business was booming at that point in time. Right? So a little different from the rest of us, where, you know, business really boomed after COVID, but clearly business was booming during COVID. And the idea was that you know, two teams come together and service the customer in a similar fashion. Right? So there are two different teams, one working with, let's say, doctors, one working with pharmacies, and you had to get them together because of what was happening in COVID. You couldn't send everyone everywhere. Travel was restricted, things like that. So the idea was that bring people together, but then the mindsets were very different. Right? You had to bring in people who would explain what it means to be in the shoes of the other team, which goes to a doctor, and then of course somebody who explains to me why, you know, going to a pharmacy actually has some benefits as well in terms of, you know, the local population still is going to a pharmacy which is open during COVID. So bringing these teams together, for example, explaining what's in it for me, if I'm the salesperson, and also looking at, you know, what technology can do for these two teams to bring them together. Also looking at even softer aspects like strengths. You know, what are the strengths that I can use when I go to a customer that I've never been to before? I think this actually answers a lot of this question about where is the organization going. You know, it's actually trying to serve a certain set of customers in a one-stop or a one-window format. How will that benefit me as a business? Yes, this is going to actually triple or quadruple the business. For me as a person, what is the benefit? I actually pick up a few skills which I never had before, and I never thought I would be able to operate in that space. So maybe my domain expertise also gets added, and tomorrow I could actually be a head of sales for both the teams, as an example. So I think if we are able to answer some of these questions in terms of where we are going as an organization, as an individual, and what is the larger purpose, why does the organization exist in terms of serving the customer, then I think, and you know, what tools can help us, then I think, you know, this whole thing about the challenges are actually taken care of. These are actually the challenges if you think in reverse.
Thanks, Ravi. Krishna, what measures or metrics can HR use to assess the transformative impact of agility?
Yeah, I think I spoke about it briefly in my previous example. So I just built on that, and in the interest of time, just about 4 minutes, and hopefully we have some Q&A from the audience as well. So just building on that example, I just picked one around talent development. So often, I think the key insight, at least I would like to share, is measure what matters, and what matters is ultimately business outcomes that matter to me from organizational success. So when you think about talent development, we always think about a lot of inputs that come in. So for instance, we look at top talent in the company, or we look at succession planning, building a leadership pipeline. Often we focus on what can we do to develop those leaders, the future leaders. But actually when rubber hits the road, when there's a job opening, do we select these leaders? Do we allow them to audition for these roles? So we started measuring output metrics as well, which is actually when we say successors are ready for this particular role, how many of them actually qualify? When the hard choice was to be made, did we actually pick them, or did business shy away from picking them? Then definitely our succession programs are not working. So when you actually start tying in both input and output, and for each of the personas we had this, so we were able to very tangibly measure success or lack of it. And it's not like we had success in all dimensions. So I think that's the key insight that I'd like to share with you.
And I'd also like to add on here, I always believe that when you're building the succession planning, it's not an overnight process. It's a gradual process where you feel that now the person is ready to take the next level. It's not the overnight where you take 4 rounds of interview and you decide that okay, this person is capable to take this level. Thank you so much. Siddharth, the last question of the evening for you. I hope this is a simple one and one which has not been answered by all of these folks. How can Agile HR practices be strategically aligned with broader organizational goals for maximum impact?
Okay. So I think the beauty of Agile HR is that it starts and ends with business, right? You can have different kinds of metrics. One are your beautiful vanity metrics, okay? Just keep doing it. Keeps shows that HR is busy. The other is reported metrics, maybe some meaning. The next level is effort metrics. मैं इतना काम करता हूँ, right? Next goes to efficiency metrics. See, this is good. This is how good I am. The next level is effectiveness metric, which is like, see what I did has this effect. And finally is impact metric. And impact metric needs to start and end with dollars. Or okay, multiply by 8 if you are very nationalistic. So I just give one example because it's HR1, right? So think about that corner of the building, of that room, right? So it has 3 walls coming there. And there's a point where all these 3 walls meet, right? That is the point of operationalization of Agile HR and alignment strategy, right? So think of one wall as the business need or the business problem. Think of the other wall as the people. Now, if you just do business and people and stop there, you will end up with Jugaad solutions or Mara-Mari solutions. Okay, which is put everybody on third party and there are no results, kick everyone out, right? So that's not what we are looking at. I think what's important is the base. The base is HR expertise. Only when all these 3 meet, you will have a point where you find a very unique solution for that business, for that problem, right? And once you're done with that, you will need to move on to the next business need or problem, right? And that's how you typically kind of operationalize and make it stick, right? But the big challenge right now is we need to kind of actually sell this concept even to CEOs, to very, very senior HR professionals also. Because I've been having conversations with some very senior folks in the business and so on. They're like, ये सब experiment है, and I've got to take that effort and tell them, ये experiment नहीं है, this is actually what HR is supposed to be doing for you. You've never experienced it, right? You've never gone in an AC bus, in a Volvo bus in Bangalore. You've always gone on very rickety buses and you believe that that is what it's supposed to be, right? I mean, wake up, right? HR is growing up and HR will add value to you. And it's about time we start doing that little bit of sales, right? You've got to sell that product and that solution to them and say, hey, this is what HR is supposed to be doing. The rest of it may be 30% of HR's job, but 70% has got to be enabling business to go to the next level.
Thank you so much. Thank you, gentlemen. I'd like to open the panel now to the audience for any questions.
Thanks so much.
Hi, this is Rajesh. I'm from a training business background. So I'm founder of Scopin.com. We are a marketplace for trainers. So my question is, the way I see it, HR has got 2 privileges, unique privileges in organizations. One, they have got the last mile connectivity in an organization, wherein the first letter and the last letter goes and everything in between happens through them. So they kind of have the watchdog facility. Second, they also is a unique function which is connected with every employee of an organization, right? Now, when I see it from the other side, and whenever I have interacted with multiple people in an organization, and ask them, can you please connect me with HR? 9 out of the 10 people have no clue how to connect an external person with an HR. So the question is there a gap where HR has the connectivity with the employees, but the employees are not able to connect back with HR at ease? That's number one. Second question is, typically the leaders, like if I'm an employee, so my manager, super manager, and then it goes till the last, management. And that's the leadership kind of, how you look upon. Is there a role that HR can play to support these leaders to percolate the idea which they want to do, which otherwise they are not able to do because of their busy schedule? So for example, they hold the entire training of an organization, right? Typically HR holds. How do they ensure that simple trainings and enablements are done so that the leader at the top need not come down every time to kind of impart that aspect to the last mile employee? So these are the two questions which I had. Thank you.
The question is, why do you want someone external to talk to an HR person?
Why do?
Your first question was that how do you connect?
Yeah, so HR knows everyone. HR is connected with the employee, but the employees are not connected back with the HR. At ease, yeah, employees, I meant to say.
There must be something wrong with that. That is a gap.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very serious problem, right? It's as good as I just want to connect with this person, but that person is like complete clueless. I don't know. I don't want to get into that space. I don't know what is stopping them. They have even no clue who to connect with as well.
No, but there are tools like HR1 which can help you, right? So just log in, look for your HR business partner.
I know.
Use a chatbot.
I'm talking about the mindset. I'm talking about the mindset part.
No,
technically yes. But people are reluctant to connect external people with the HR. They don't want to go and connect with HR and say that I want to give this reference. Why don't you?
Then there is a cultural issue.
When you say external people, what does external people imply?
It could be any kind of connect. Let's say a vendor who wants to connect with the HR, which is of use for the HR actually, because vendors come to support, right, the system. But vendors have no choice to connect the HR and convey that, hey, I do this service. Why don't you look at it? And the only way he can do it possibly is that I know this person who has worked with me in the past, and we know each other for 20 years. Why don't you connect me with the HR? And that person is completely blank. I'm not talking about people who are just passed by us. People who knows each other. So for example, I started my career with TCS. If I go back to 23 years I'm into this business, right? Into corporate as well as business. If I go back to one of my previous connects and ask, can you please connect with HR? Mostly it is no.
It's like you had a bad experience with some people, but here you have a room full of hundreds of
You don't need a go to jump. You just see everyone.
No, fair enough. I think it might happen in some organizations, but I'm sure there's a way to reach the right person. See, that's the reason why I was asking, why does external person want to talk to someone in HR? If the purpose is clear, let's say it's a vendor who wants to provide services, then I think there are the right people in the organization who can connect the vendor to the right HR person. Right? If I'm internal, and I'm serious, I'm not joking. I have something like HR1 or an SAP or a success factor or I have an HR. I mean, everyone has a tool these days, and there's a way to connect. So, if that barrier still exists, and might be in some organizations, honestly, I worked in 4 different organizations in the last 27 years, I haven't found this, but if that exists, then it is unfortunate. Maybe that's a question for the HR person or that particular organization to answer.
Ravi, adding what you just said, I think when it comes to vendors or anybody external, right, we have an admin team or a commercial team who would be looking into these kind of requests where they would like to, why would they like to connect with HR? Because they are not dealing with any kind of, you should say a human problem in terms of, it's because they're dealing with the employees within the organization. Outside world, tackling their problems or understanding why they need to get connected to, I still, it's a question for me.
Satinder, I think I'm sensing something very subtle here.
Okay.
LND services.
See, I will also leave it very subtly. Okay. So I was listening to a Buddhist monk's talk a few years ago, and he said, all of us are like trees with thorns. Some of us walk around with very large thorns, and others have much smaller thorns. Some of us don't have any thorns. Okay? So, the moment of truth for that person whom Sir reached out was, I don't want to reach out to my HR guy. I don't want to get into that space. मेरे को वहाँ जाना नहीं है, बात करना नहीं है. Okay? So, I think it's a reflection of something that's happening somewhere. Whether I, as HR professional, I am welcoming or might not so welcome. I think that's a. I'll just leave it there. I think we can move to the next question.
Here the second question.
The other gentleman. Oh, you had it.
How can HR be part of the leadership and enablement in an organization? Alone, technology is and HR will have to only one thing, which is to increase which technology can't do exponentially do. So in that case, how do we make sure that the HR retains their part in the organization by being better in HR?
I still don't understand the question.
We can take this session offline.
Yeah, we can maybe connect offline and offline.
After a few cocktails.
So, what a wonderful discussion. Thank you for all the panelists and HRone for making this possible. This is Aniruddha from Flipkart. My question is kind of deep dive into the question Ravi was asked. Technology as enabler of HR, right? So generally companies have employees to HR ratio maybe 150, 200 is to 1, and more companies have it in thousands, say again 3000 is to 1. With technology and SCM tools coming to picture, OpenAI, ChatGPT, and so on and so forth, would really like to know your insights as the evolving role of nature, not in the sense of designations, because this ratio will be only increasing going forward. Employees to HR, the tax SCM, HR1 and other tools adding to the risk. So how do you see, with more than half a century of experience on the stage here, my experience, how do you see that role evolving? What are the new hats HR professionals will have to wear in that evolving reality?
Yeah, great. So I'll go ahead and then I don't. So very interesting. It's a very interesting time. For a long, long time, many years, I think the HR function or the HR roles didn't change too much, and it's getting disruptive now. And there's a saying one of my managing directors used to have in one of my previous organizations. He used to be very sarcastic about HR, but also very supportive. And he used to say this that HR is too important to be left to HR. And we are not. And I used to tell him that every manager is an HR manager, including yourself, and you are the managing director. So fine, I'm ready to give up my role as an HR person, then you need to take it. Because, and I think that's where we are coming to, right? And I would really hope his sarcastic statement about HR being too important to be left to HR people really comes true. Not yet. We still have a few miles to go. But I think roles will change in terms of being more strategic and responsibility. But probably we'll all have discussions with our managing directors or boards in terms of what we are going to do in business in the next 10 years. Therefore, what could be the talent strategy? And we'll probably reach there just to answer the question. It could also be that ChatGPT takes over job descriptions, as we have seen here, or even announcements or whatever. We get out of doing things which is in no man's land. I hope that will happen, and we get into discussions which actually influence business outcomes. We do today as well. It's much better than 20 years ago. But I think this part about business outcome, I think we'll all become more financially adept at explaining to people. And the last part, I think I'll go back to my colleague here who mentioned about external. And I think the HR person also is an external ambassador in many ways, right? Which I think he was referring to. So maybe as of today, we're not really great ambassadors of the HR function. I hope that, or of the company, I hope we'll reach there as well. So I think these three kind of roles might emerge.
Thank you.
We will take this last question. Yeah, thank you. No, you don't need to be sorry. Please go ahead.
Can I ask now?
Yeah, please.
Thank you very much. I'm just curious here. I'm not sure if this is the right question. how much of HR involvement or how much of HR management reaches to the business goal, that is customer satisfaction. For example, AI bot, right? So we see that it's fast, we get response, but they can say that, hi, this is me, but I'm sorry, I don't have a particular resolution for a question, right? So at the end of the day, we don't have an answer. So do we, as HRs, do we stop with employee engagement just for the people of our own organization? Do we stop there? Or if we are stopping, can we broaden our experience or horizons and do something using design thinking so that our business goal can be achieved in the long run? Can HR do more? Can they partner with the sales people, marketing people to give the solution? Right? Because it doesn't matter if AI responds. AI should give the right response, and they should give the product that they promise. I'm sorry if I'm confusing the question. So does HR, do they have limitations when they say HR? Like, does it stop with the employees that they have, employee engagement, employee experience? Can they take more of responsibility? Is it there, or am I missing something here? That's my curious question. Thank you.
Take a shot at it and others can follow. So I think the greatest power lies in a company when they stop thinking about functional silos, like it's not just HR. And I use this word, this enterprise mindset or ownership mindset, and other folks talked about it in other language. Essentially, if you think of yourself as an HR person, you remain an HR person, right? But if you think of yourself as whatever leadership level you are at, but you're solving for the enterprise, then the boundaries start to disappear. So the way I think is HR there as a function, probably the question to ask is any function boundaryless today? In many organizations, everybody starts thinking in boundaries. And that's where all the sort of constraints start. The truly thriving cultures are ones where they're boundaryless. So the more you can sort of change the mindset and create an environment where all of this thrives, people will start contributing cross-functionally. And so that's why I think a lot of investments need to happen, for instance, in cross-functional pollination across, right? Which is essentially, do I understand the business? When we talk about HR, do they understand the business? It all starts and ends with the business. I think he talked about it as well, right? So think about it from that perspective. I think the limits are endless. When you start thinking about business outcomes, you will automatically start deriving what are the talent strategy outcomes I need to drive, what's the kind of design that would help reach those outcomes. I mean, there are so many possibilities that exist that I think HR can contribute to. I don't think employees is the start and the end of it, is the way I think. Others to add.
Thank you so much. That brings an end to the panel discussion. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you for your wonderful insights. It was a great conversation.